Okay, now I know some people are still adding up their scores, but for those who have added them up, what they're really saying is, I mean, you could not, for example, have circled the death of a spouse, okay, and that, you know, life to be normal, which is why they've really said it has to be under 100. But even given that, there are many of these events that if you've only experienced one of the really high scoring ones, despite the fact that it's less than 100, we're not saying that isn't stressful, we're just saying that's probably the level of stress that exists in the average person's life over a 6-month period. So we're not saying it's normal in the sense that it's an easy experience or it's you know, a stress-less experience. We're just saying that would be consistent. Are you ladies okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. If you've scored up to 150, but not above, then we would say that's moderately high. Now, the reason that we even rate these is it has to do with the stress that's generated within. And actually, as the scores get higher, so for example, if you're between 150 and 300 and scoring very high, and definitely if you're over 300, then what we're saying is this will be, not maybe, this will be impacting your health. So change generates reaction. Some of that reaction is stress, and stress can generate ill health. It can affect you physically, emotionally, spiritually, socially. These are the effects of extreme change, extreme stress. So that's an exercise that's private. You don't need to share it with your friends if you don't want to, but you can later do that. But it's just to help you to see that change, and I'm sure it isn't anything that you don't already know, that change can be a difficult experience, challenging and stressful. I would like to suggest to you now, if we take a person-centred approach to the response to change, yes?
But if your score is less than 100, does that mean you're one of the walking dead?
No, yes, I know on that, Holmes and Ray actually don't seem to say very much about that, but I think the assumption is if it's less than 100, it's normal. Yeah.
Normal?
Yeah. Are you surprised to discover you're normal? Very surprised?
Very normal.
Very normal. So what I'm going to suggest to you is that part of the challenge of change, I can't hear myself, is that I think it actually threatens us. Change is a potential threat to, I think, 4 fundamental things in each of us. One is our security. Okay, so really, am I safe? Am I going to survive this? And am I going to get through this? Am I going to cope? I think it does challenge our security. When I asked you to change seats, some were saying, but this is my seat. I'm safe here. I'm secure here. Okay, in a much smaller scale, but that was what was happening for some. I chose this seat. It's where I feel safe. But I also think it challenges us at the level of our identity. Who among you have ever had an experience where something, usually a command or an instruction from on high has come and everybody's got to respond to it and it's got to be yesterday, and you just feel like you're so unappreciated, you're invisible. You just feel, oh right, yeah, whatever, same old. I just feel like I'm lost in this. I don't know who I am in this. It's as though nobody, can see me or hear me, or so there's a threat to our identity, I think, especially if our identity is actually wrapped up in what we do. Now, so many of us are what we do, which is why it's so important to appreciate that we have an identity that is actually unique anyway, in that you are the only person who can do life like you, as you, and your way, and have the influence that you as an individual have. But so often we are the sum total of what we do. And sometimes what we do changes. And it can leave us in a very sticky place, because if my whole identity is built upon my career, then if my career is lost through ill health, through redundancy, through retirement, I'm losing who I am here. I'm not doing too well. So I think it threatens our identity. But I also think it threatens our belonging. You see, when we face change, sometimes what happens is we're taken out of our comfort zone. We discover actually, okay, I've kept my job, I'm not being made redundant, I am facing new changes, but I've got to work in that team. I've got to go and be part of that team. Oh, I don't know if I belong in that team. I don't know if I'll fit there. I don't know if that'll feel okay. I can see people nodding their heads. It's obviously hitting a nerve somewhere. It's like, oh, but I want to be in this team. You know, that's the kind of thing. We really do need a sense of belonging. It's in us as human beings to belong, to connect, to be in relationship, and to have good relationships. And so there's a challenge when change comes that threatens our belonging. But I also believe that one of the other areas of threat is actually our purpose. Has anybody been in the situation where you are the new person in the office? Your first day at school. You know, you're the one who basically has arrived. You know that within you, you've got a whole lot of things you want to give. You've got a whole lot of excitement about this job. You've got a whole lot of things, if you're going to school, you want to learn. But the reality is, your purpose has not been realised. So all of this new change kind of leaves you feeling a wee bit like a spare man at a wedding. You know, it's that whole kind of sense of, I have a purpose, but I just can't seem to get on the first rung of any ladder here to actually climb to where I'm going or to achieve my goals or aims. So I think change also threatens our purpose. It can threaten the purpose for which we are in a job or that we've been called to serve somewhere. So with that in mind, I think our security, our identity, our belonging and our purpose are challenged by change. Okay, so what we're going to do about it then? I would like to suggest that there are actually some practical things that can help us, not just to, you know, I'm going to use an analogy from my work. I meet people on a weekly basis, if not sometimes on a daily basis, who suffer from chronic pain. Now, one of our jobs is to try and find really multiple approaches to the management of pain. It's not just about painkillers. And then so much so that there's a Pain Management Scotland that actually now exists, who are a fantastic organisation. And the whole thing is, I think there's a world of a difference between coping with pain and living with pain. Do you know what I'm saying? If you cope with something, it's like a ball and chain. It's like, well, I'm dragging it along and I'm putting up with it. But actually, if there is a move into living with something, actually there's life there. There's maybe some moving forward. There's maybe something to be gained. That's what I'm really saying. I think there is a difference between coping with change and actually living with change. And I believe that every single person in this room has the capacity to live with change. In fact, you're demonstrating it probably on a daily basis. So briefly, because I know we have probably about 10 or 15 minutes left, I would like to run through each of these with the aim. I'll read them out because some people will be listening on tape. Basically, acknowledgement. I think that when it comes to the challenge of change, there has to be an acknowledgement of the change. I think there has to be adjustment. I think also we have to adapt, so there's a phase of adaptation, but there's also a sense of acceptance. I don't mean resignation. Acceptance is different from resignation. Acceptance, I think, can be a very positive thing. One of the things that we looked at on our life change scale was death of a loved one, of a spouse. And I know that in the grieving process, again, something that we use in our work, we encourage people to see that through the process of grief and grieving, there is a time where you reach, there is a place that you reach of acceptance. And acceptance is not a resignation, it's not a negative thing. Acceptance is actually it's a living thing. It's actually it's a place that you arrive at intact. So that's really, I think, where we would like to go next is just to look at this acknowledgement, this adjustment, this adaptation, and the acceptance.